All right. Have you ever ignored the weird sound in your car? It's making a weird clinky noise and you just decide to ignore it and then act surprised when it breaks down later. That's the ignorance tax. And athletes are paying it all the time with their gains, with their performance, and with their dreams. Today, we're talking about the dumbest mistakes athletes keep making, not because they're lazy, but because they don't know what they don't know, or they're listening to the wrong people. Think about this. The most expensive mistake that athletes are making, it's not an injury, it's not choosing the wrong school, it's what we call the ignorance tax. And it costs them time, progress, and opportunity. So the ignorance tax, think about, a real life tax where it takes a percentage of your pay every single time. The ignorance tax is what you pay mentally, physically, and competitively for either not listening to the people who know what they're talking about or listening to the wrong ones. Just to give you guys some examples here, that time you didn't take a coach's advice and it cost you. Maybe it cost you an opportunity to play in college. Maybe it cost you an opportunity to start on varsity, whatever it might have been. It could have been a smaller thing, but it cost you. That lifts that you did wrong because a buddy told you this is the best way to do it for games, and then you get injured. Or that diet you followed that actually made you slower, not stronger. It made you bigger, but not stronger. These are the types of sacrifices or this tax that is really impacting you because you're just taking the wrong advice. You're around the wrong things. But ultimately, again, here's the kicker. It's not always on purpose. Sometimes you're just following what you've seen online, what a well-meaning coach or parent says, what another teammate has recommended, but that doesn't make it right. Just to give you guys another example here, think about injuries. Think about an Achilles tear, an ACL, Tommy John, all of these things. It's not just like, boom, it happens. There is buildup to that. There is buildup to that injury. It doesn't just start with a snap. It starts with tight hips, sore elbows, a small tweak that you just ignored. And it led to an injury that took out half your season or whole season. That's exactly how the ignorance tax works. You make small mistakes over and over and over again, and it costs you in the end. So it could be a small thing like skipping breakfast every day and not limiting your gains. Could be training hard, but your recovery sucks. So you never really play at your full potential. And maybe even you end up getting injured because of it. Or it's listening to the wrong advice and you end up either throwing college opportunities away, could be something big like that. Or it could be taking, just small, stupid advice that ultimately holds you back. And so, again, at first, that first time you skip breakfast or that first time you kind of skip your recovery, not a big deal. But over time, you fall behind, your body starts breaking down, or your opportunities start shrinking, and you don't even realize why. And so let's talk about a few common ways that athletes are paying this ignorance tax. And number one is not listening to the right people. So when we talk about not listening to the right people, I want to give you a real example here. So I've had a lot of athletes who have shared with me that a certain coach recommended this diet, or they recommend to do this thing so that they could gain weight or to lean out. And they're really, frankly, dumb things. Could be things like drinking a gallon of milk a day. It could be things like saying that there are no good that comes from carbs when carbs are essential for the body and especially for athletes. Like carbs are going to help you maximize your potential. Next side note, next episode, we're going to be unpacking that. So if you guys really want to understand why carbs are good, even if you're cutting, we're going to be talking about that next episode. But again, if you take advice from somebody who does not understand the subject that you are talking or that they are talking about, you're putting yourself at risk for injuries, for not getting the results that you want, for maybe even getting yourself in trouble and maybe even harming your body long term. And really, again, it may just be simply limiting your potential. If you are taking advice from somebody who has no background in nutrition and science, for example, no understanding of how to fuel for performance, and no business guiding an athlete's body, then that's a risk that you are taking on yourself. So think about that. If you have a football coach, baseball coach, whoever trying to give you nutrition advice, or you have a, let's say, a physical therapist trying to give you mental performance advice, and they don't really have any background in that, like, be careful. They might know what they're talking about. They might not know what they're talking about. So this is where you can pay a very costly price. You can pay a really high ignorance tax if you are listening to the wrong people. It could be a coach, could be a YouTuber, could be a friend in the weight room. You have to filter your inputs. This is where social media can be a great thing. It can be a very toxic thing. You might find some great advice on social media. You also might find some really bad advice on social media. So, just because someone is confident doesn't mean they're correct. That's why so many athletes plateau, why so many athletes limit their potential, why so many athletes end up getting injured, or maybe even after sport, they screw their bodies over because they took advice from the wrong people. So make sure that, again, just because somebody is confident doesn't mean that they actually know what they're talking about. And that's the thing that we have to understand in this social media age, especially for you guys up and coming, teenagers, athletes, that there are so many people out there who know how to market, but they don't know the information itself. They just know how to sell it. So somebody can be great at selling information, and that information could be fake. We see it all the time in things around famous people, around all sorts of things. There's a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of fake science out there too. And so if you're hearing something that's not consistent with everything else, if it's not consistent with everything else you've learned, like, put a red flag on it. It may not be wrong, but more than likely it could be wrong. So make sure that you're taking advice from the right people for the right things. That football coach might have great information about football, about speed, about strength, or whatever it might be. But they may have garbage information when it comes to something like nutrition or mental performance or things like that. So mistake number 2 is listening too late. If you think about a car, if you think about, maybe you or your parents, they've been told by a mechanic, like, okay, that timing belt is going bad. Like, you need to change that soon, or you could have some issues. And then they ignored it. And then the engine blew because once that belt snaps, it was connected to the engine. Boom. Yeah. I don't know all the science to that. But again, one example, personal experience. Uh, a lot of times we do that to our cars. We do it to a thing where we won't listen to the mechanic until it's too late. This is where you guys as athletes need to understand, like, you guys have a limited recruiting window. If you are waiting until your junior year to take recruiting seriously, or until you're injured to take sleep seriously, or until the season to start figuring out your nutrition, you're going to be behind. You're going to struggle. It's going to be very difficult for you to go D1 if you have not been taking your development and your recruiting seriously until junior year or even senior year. And so that's where we have to be realistic at that point. But if you can stop that, if you're a freshman right now, if you're ninth grade or eighth grader, whatever right now, like, this is your opportunity to start taking things seriously. I had an athlete, a 2029 athlete who, we worked together while he was an eighth grader. He started meal prepping on his own. He started doing things on his own. And he also started figuring out, we talked a lot about sleep. And now his nutrition and sleep are so much better, so that, yes, he may have, torn his ACL and meniscus and stuff, but he's figuring out how to bounce back faster because he's got some foundations going. And even though he might be frustrated about that injury and just like accidental injury of how it happened, he's still driven to keep going, and he's already got that solid foundation going into high school. So it's going to make it a lot easier for him to bounce back stronger. And so if your parent is telling you need to do this thing, or your coach is telling you need to do this thing, and you should do that thing, you should probably do it. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the further you're going to be behind. Prevention is cheaper than repair. But athletes pay a very high ignorance tax when they wait too long to start doing what they should have done from day one. So it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. It doesn't mean that when a parent tells you you got to do 10 things that you do all 10 things perfectly right away. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to work on these three things first. When I work with my athletes about nutrition, just to give an example, I'm like, hey, breakfast, pre and post workout, those are our biggest priorities right off the bat. Maybe some athletes, they have a bigger red flag at lunchtime or their hydration sucks, whatever it might be, and we'll work on that. But let's not overwhelm you. Let's focus on the things that are going to move your needle the fastest and the soonest. So the more that you can correct that, the more that you can make those changes sooner, the further off you're going to be later on. If you wait, if you decide, my nutrition can wait until later, or my mental performance, it can wait till later, or oh yeah, I'm gonna start lifting weights like you're gonna be behind. You think you want to go D1, but you don't have D1 level habits. So make sure that you are not listening too late, because that's one of the biggest taxes that you can make. And if you understand anything about taxes, if you have a 20% tax, that's 20% that you're not getting, which means if you think about your full potential as an athlete, you're only getting 80% of your full potential if you're paying a 20% ignorance tax. So really think about how much are you limiting your potential simply because you're not willing to listen to the right people or listen to them fast enough. Mistake number 3 is assuming effort equals progress. Just because you work hard doesn't mean you are making progress. It has to be the right kind of work. There are athletes who will lift 5 days a week and still not gain a pound because they're not taking care of their nutrition. I've seen athletes plenty of times downing their protein, drinking 3 protein shakes a day, and still not be able to perform at a high level, still not be able to build the muscle because they're not taking care of the rest. Effort alone doesn't guarantee results. A smart strategy does. So if you're just simply lifting, you're just kind of bouncing around the gym, whether you're working out on your own and you're just bouncing around the gym, or if you're working out consistently with your team, but then you're not taking nutrition seriously, you're not going to build muscle. If you are trying to get faster and you're just doing a couple agility ladder drills, you're spending just your whole time on agility ladder, you're probably not going to get faster. Let's make sure you have a smart strategy. And that's where we go back to find the right coaches. My passion for this podcast, the reason I continue to do this is because I want to make sure that you guys are getting resources. I have college coaches on here, I have speed coaches, mental performance, all the different people on here so that you guys can come in, you find that speed coach and you're like, "Ooh, I want to follow them. They have advice." Either get free information from them or paid information from them, and you get the help that you need. And so let's really make sure that, you are taking those opportunities sooner rather than later, because the longer you wait, the further you're going to be behind. And make sure that the work that you're putting in is work that is fruitful, not just busy work. For work that's going to get you results. All right, let's flip it. I've talked a little bit about the solutions here. I want to hit three ways to avoid the ignorance tax. Some of it's going to be overlap of what I just kind of emphasized, but I also really want to hit on this. So, number 1, as I just emphasized, find trusted voices early. You guys have a list of people on this podcast that you can pull out. You can see the speed ones, you can see the mental performance, you can see different people that you can pull out, go follow them and get information and learn from those people. You know, I vet my people. I don't just grab anybody and throw them on the podcast. Like I look at, oh, hey, like what have they done? How do they coach? What are their philosophies? Like I look at the things to make sure that they know what they're talking about. So vet who you listen to. Don't just follow anybody. Look at who's behind the info. What are their credentials? So is it just some strength coach who took a couple months of nutrition or like read one chapter in their fitness book about nutrition, or is it somebody who actually studied it for a living? Is it somebody who has a certification in mental performance, or is it somebody who is just talking about mental performance? Like, yeah, you can still learn some things just because people's life experiences, you might learn from some of their things. But again, they don't really fully understand it to the level that you can, that really help you succeed. They might have some foundations, but they're not going to have everything that you need. But ideally, you want somebody who has either done what you want to do or have helped others do what you want to do, specifically through what you are coaching them through or what they're coaching you through. So think about this. If you talk to a former D1 athlete, they can teach you a lot of things about what it takes to become a D1 athlete. However, their level of nutrition might be, yeah, we had these things, or this worked for me. A lot of their information on an athlete level is going to be what worked for me. And they might be some female athlete who played soccer versus you who is a male baseball player. Like, those aren't going to go together. Even a soccer player and a soccer player, both female, still they may not have the right information for you because they're basing it off of what they know versus, or what they did for themselves versus what you need to do. So understand, like, yes, they need to be an expert in what they did and be able to help people in that. If you are talking to a speed coach and they've helped multiple people shave off their 40 times and their 60 times, probably a good person to listen to about speed. If you've worked with a dietitian or whatever, and or you're talking to them and they're you want to get bigger, stronger, faster, and they've helped many athletes get bigger, stronger, faster, probably a good person to listen to. If there's a football coach that you want to be more around or you want to get mentored by, and you want to go D1 and they've helped a lot of athletes go D1, probably a good person to be around. These are the things that find those trusted experts early and really tap into them. Again, that is why I use this podcast for you guys so that, it's allowing you to get the resources, the information, the guidance you need to help you reach your full potential. All right, fix number 2 is apply early, not late. So again, don't wait until you're stuck to fix something. If you want to gain muscle, start 3, 6, 9 months before the season. Don't come up to me or a strength coach or whoever in July and say that you want to gain 10 pounds before September, because that's just not going to happen if you want muscle. If you want to lean out, don't come to somebody in March, a strength or nutrition, whatever, and say that you want to lose weight in March when you're about to start baseball season. Like, that's just not a healthy way to do things if you still want to perform the way that you should. If you want to get faster, same thing. If you are going into a busy soccer season and you want to get faster, it's probably going to be a bit more difficult for you to get the speed training you need to get faster in the middle of your busy season. So apply these things early. Try to take action early. Get the information you need so that you can succeed there. And then number 3 is own the process. No one's going to care more about your future than you. So stop outsourcing your goals to scrolling on TikTok, to following trends, to your teammates. What separates the athletes who level up from the ones who stay stuck? It's not just genetics. Yeah, that helps, but it's ownership. It's not blaming anyone else for you falling short and taking action to close that gap. I've had 3 college coaches that I just interviewed today. Every single one of them talked about ownership. They talked about not blaming others. They talked about, one of them straight up said, he's like, if I hear a player or a parent blame a coach because of playing time, that player is not getting recruited by me. So take ownership of the process, take ownership of the work that you're putting in, and be honest with yourself. If you're not that level, then maybe you're not that level. Like, if you're not starting, there's probably a good reason you're not starting. Either it's your personality or it's your skill. Make sure that you're addressing those. Now, I want to give an example here that really highlights a lot of this. I talk about Drew a lot, and it's because I just see in him this process. He committed early to nutrition. He committed to nutrition in his freshman going into sophomore year, and that got him stronger. He gained 30 pounds. He got stronger, was hitting the ball harder, was allowing him to play at a much higher level. He was already a really talented athlete, but it allowed him to play at an even higher level, which led to him committing D1 in the start of his junior year. Now, it didn't just stop there, though. He continued to work on his speed because he was told he needed to work on speed. He continued to work on that, and he shaved off almost a full second off of his 60 time to get a 6.7. And yeah, 6.7. And he is still focused, though. Even though he got that time, he is still showing up, putting in the work, doing everything he can so that by the time he graduates in the 9 months, he's at a much higher level than even he was at the end of his junior year. There are things that he struggled with in his junior season. He wants to work on that. He wants to get better, and he's been putting in the work to get better at that. You've got to take that same ownership. Yes, you may have been putting in some good work. Yes, maybe you've gotten a commitment or some college offers, but there's still always work to do. One of the coaches I had on today, he talked about the offseason. He talked about he gave a specific athlete example, and he talked about a guy who in the offseason came back and was like 10, 15 pounds heavier, and he was stronger. And then he came back another offseason and his 3 points, like his 3 point percentage was much higher. He was, making shots a lot higher because he was putting in the work in the offseason. Even though he was at the college level, even though he had these opportunities, he continues to get better. He continues to find ways to get better. So make sure that you are really being honest with yourself and think about like, what is the cost that you are paying right now? By not listening to the right advice, by listening to the wrong people, or by just not taking things seriously early enough. What is the cost that you are paying? Because there is a cost. Are you losing opportunities to play on varsity? Are you losing opportunities to play at the college level? Are you getting injured more than you probably should because of just not taking care of your body right? Like, really think about, what is the ignorance tax on yourself? Are you paying a 20% income ignorance tax that you are limiting your potential by 20%? So maybe you have that D1 potential, but because of that ignorance tax, you only got 80% in you. That's all you're putting out on there. Yeah, you're not going to go D1. You're not going to reach that full potential. So really, really think about, it's a trickle down effect. It's a progressive thing, just like an injury. Most injuries it's a progressive thing. It's the body slowly breaking down. And this is going to be your body, your potential slowly breaking down if you don't change sooner. So you can keep guessing and you can keep paying that ignorance tax every single day, every single week, or you can learn, you can ask questions to the right people, and you can build systems that actually level you up and actually help you reach your full potential. Remember that. Last thing I want to leave you guys with is, again, next episode, if you guys are concerned about carbs, you guys want to learn carbs and cutting, all the things, we're going to talk specifically about carbs and cutting. So check that out. And as always, keep striving for greatness.